Hello, Mr. Ambassador. My first question will be, could you assess Ukrainian parliamentary elections? And how do you think it will affect Georgia-Ukraine relations? And what will be the dynamics of these relations under President Zelensky's administration? Will it change or will it stay the same?
Well, thank you. Of course, this issue, the issue of the new parliament and elections to the Rada of Ukraine was one of the main topics, not only in Ukraine, but in Europe and globally. And what we expected, Ukrainians received. It's a total change of the composition of the legislative body of Ukraine. It's for the first time in the history of Ukraine that one political party dominates in the parliament. So they have all powers and all possibilities to form a government and to continue or to restart reforms and transformation process in Ukraine. It is also very important that 3/3 of the new deputies are new. They were never members of Ukrainian parliament before. So it's a total change of the composition. What does it mean? It just, the current situation in Ukraine reflects the expectations and hopes of Ukrainian people. Strong demand for new faces, strong demand for a new policy, strong demand for better life. It's there. So now we are looking forward to see the first steps of the newly elected parliament. There are some indications that the first meeting, the first session, could be open on the day of the independence of Ukraine, 21st of August. And let's hope that it will be like this. And coming back to your question about Georgia and Ukraine relations, so again, for me, it's very simple. First of all, our leaders, President Zelensky, had already met President of Georgia. President Saakashvili attended the inauguration ceremony. And in Brussels, President Zelensky met also Prime Minister of Georgia. And what is the main, what should we understand and keep in mind? That in Georgia, Ukraine is the most friendly nation, like recent polls again reconfirmed. In Ukraine, in turn, among public, among the population, Georgia and Georgians are the most welcome people too. So everything is there. The, again, readiness of peoples and nations of two countries to continue to live and to cooperate closer together. So, and it's just up to the president and new parliament to satisfy this request of people in Georgia and in Ukraine. And of course, we see very good prospects for better dynamics of our bilateral relations in the future.
Let's talk about Interparliamentary Assembly on Orthodoxy. You were the one who left on the first day, this session. And after that, we saw what we saw and what happened on the 20th and 21st of June. Some of the people say that it was a mistake made by government that a Russian deputy appeared in the chair of parliament speaker, but some of the people say that it was a well-planned provocation. What do you think is closer to reality? Was it a mistake government made, or was it provocation government could not really identify before?
There are many implications and many additional factors which also were relevant to the situation. Of course, the fact when representatives of the State Duma of the Russian Federation appeared here in Georgia, in the capital of the country, 20% of which is occupied by the Russian Federation, couldn't be considered as usual business. It was a kind of event which could provoke any protest or any further steps. And for me, when I attended this opening session, it wasn't acceptable just to listen to the person who voted to annex Crimea, who voted to allow President Putin to use army on the territory of Ukraine, to the representative of the State Duma, which also supported and recognized so-called independence of Abkhazia and Ossetia. So no grounds for such persons to be present there. And you know, in Ukraine we cannot even imagine the situation that officials could visit my country now. It's very clear for majority of Ukrainians.
How do you think it's not clear for some Georgians or officials?
Well, you saw what happened. So Georgians were very clear in saying no. And what happened on the next day and the next night, it's already a history, a modern history of Georgia. And again, it's important that Moscow received a clear signal that nothing is forgiven, nobody forgot about the occupation, and Georgia is not ready to accept as a fact that part of its territory is occupied. The same in Ukraine. And by the way, the manifestation of intentions of our people and our official bodies was again during the session of the Parliamentary Assembly in Strasbourg, when Assembly voted to return the delegation of the Russian Federation to the session. Georgia, Ukraine, Baltic states, Poland were clearly against, in all members of the delegation. So we will continue to elaborate common approaches and common means to not only to contaminate the aggression, but also to propose our solutions in the international organizations, and at all forums we participate together.
Georgian officials, after what happened, said that what happened during the protests on 20th and 21st June, it was the attempt to storm the parliament. But the members of opposition stated that it was a very peaceful protest. How do you think, since it was necessary to make the protesters stop, how can be responsibilities redistributed between opposition and government?
So what happened over that night, all of us observed on the TV screens, and again the situation clearly reminded me long nights and sleepless nights when Maidan events took place in Ukraine. To some extent, to some point, developments were rather peaceful, but it was also screened and filmed, and you can see many pieces of information screened by different media that night, that not everything was peaceful, unfortunately. And about responsibility, it's the first thing which we should understand, that any politician bears responsibility, whether it's ruling party or the opposition, because these are the rules of the game. Responsibility, not only powers, but also responsibility. And to measure responsibility, it's up to special bodies. We have means, we have appropriate authorities, and don't forget that you in Georgia live in a democratic society which is ruled by law. So, and that's it.
We all saw what happened there, and we all saw that a lot of people were injured. By the way, I was one of them, and also some people lost their eyes, and we saw the whole picture. The main issue here is if the use of force by police was proportionate. What do you think what you saw appears to be like it was proportionate or it doesn't?
It's up to legislative or court or any other official institution to study the case by case, because there were several cases. And you know that some measures have been already taken by the Ministry of Interior, by courts and so on. So let's just give them to do their part of the job. to assess and to draw the conclusion.
But can you tell me at least your personal opinion about that or not? What you saw was, I don't know, what was that like?
You know, when events develop so quickly, rapidly, and unpredictably, it's quite difficult to take the decision what to do and when, at which stage, and what kind of preventive measures could be or couldn't be executed or taken at that time. So again, it's very difficult to draw the conclusion by TV screen only. I wasn't there, I didn't participate, but of course for those who were injured, there is one clear answer. But for those who project the force, the answer is different.
After those events, Russian President Vladimir Putin decided to ban the flights between two countries, and he also stated that Russian citizens are not safe in Georgia. How would you assess his behavior and statement, and do you think this kind of propaganda will have the effect on Russian society?
What I see since my arrival to Georgia, that your country is one of the safest places. So there is no any danger for tourists from any country if they behave appropriately. So what about the decision of Russia? For them, the pretext or preconditions are not important. They can create it anytime, any single case or no case to create a case, to decide whatever. So the problem is that many of those citizens of the Russian Federation who planned to spend holidays in Georgia are looking for other ways to get to Georgia, to the places where they wanted to be.
So can we say that they are not following what Putin says and tries to do?
Again, my vision and my experience proved many times that for Russians, for Kremlin, it's not necessary to have a pretext or precondition. They just
did what they intended to do, right?
Yes.
Okay, a journalist of TV channel, Georgian TV channel Rustav 2, used very bad language against Putin. And the interesting fact was that the State Duma decided to put sanctions on Georgia, but Putin opposed. Why do you think he behaved so? Was it because Georgian government officials were the first ones to disapprove this kind of behavior, or was it because, as some experts say, Putin wanted to appear as a kind person to Georgians and not only?
Well, again, do not try to find any reasons or grounds behind the acts and actions of Kremlin. Whatever they do, it's not predictable and not logical sometimes. This particular case, of course, you know, I'm a linguist by my education, and I cannot tolerate the use of bad language publicly. In any case, any broadcaster or any newspaper or any printed material. So for me, it's a kind of taboo. And of course, the reaction of officials in Georgia, I understand it very much. I support such acts, and I do not believe that we should, as society here or in Ukraine, tolerate language of hatred and bad language in public media.
The chronology of the events in Georgia looks like this. What happened in Pankisi, also aggravated situation in David Gareja, Tbilisi Pride Terminal, 20 and 21st June, and the case of Rostautu. Some of the experts also state that everything is just part of the one big chain. And how do you think, can we identify Russian hybrid warfare?
Two things I would like to single out. Sometimes it's very simple and very handy to use the reason of the all-reaching hand of Moscow everywhere. Too easy, too simple. On the other hand, nobody expected that your political life in Georgia or our political life in Ukraine would be easy, smooth, and everything goes straight and up. No, it's a real life with real problems which could happen, as Pankisi, as David Gereggi, as many other things. Does it mean that they are concentrated or coordinated? Not for me, because it's, again, the first part of my answer, it's too easy to look for conspiracy and to build chains of events. It's better to act appropriately at every particular case.
How would you assess what happened to TV channel Rustavi 2? Because some of the journalists which work there say that Rustavi 2 represents Western values in Georgia, and if Rustavi 2, the editorial policy of Rustavi 2 is in danger, and they say that is in danger, then democracy, freedom of speech is under danger. So how do you think?
Well, before coming here to meet you, I checked Rustavi 2. It functions properly, as usual, so no real danger for the time being. So I wouldn't like to speculate what could happen. Let's look at the situation as it is. Of course, Rustavi 2 is a brand with a very strong reputation, and of course it has its own traditions, but again, we are now in a democratic country. One of the key values is the private property. And actually, the ruling of the International Court on Human Rights was like that. It's about property. And change of the owner doesn't mean any change in the policy. I just wondering why your fears are so deep. Opposition is quite strong in Georgia, and it is always possible to establish a new media, to broadcast.
And there are a lot of media, right?
Yes, yes.
Last question about our ex-president Mikhail Saakashvili. He did not really succeed in parliamentary elections of Ukraine. How would you assess his political fortunes for future? And he opposes Georgian government, so can that be a hindering detail in our relations between Georgia and Ukraine?
Well, he is a citizen of Ukraine. He is engaged in the political activities in Ukraine. His party didn't participate because it was the last-minute decision of the leader of that party, Mikhail Saakashvili. He, at this time, his party doesn't enjoy strong support of the population. So he will continue to conduct political activities in Ukraine. How important or what could be the influence? My answer again is very simple. The population of Ukraine is 42 million. Yeah? He's one of them. The population of Georgia is less than 4 million. He was one of them. And why do you again exaggerate the role of one single citizen? People, Georgians and Ukrainians, are smart enough, good enough to understand what is the real value, what is the real policy. So let's hope for that.